Since you were a child, you have been taught to be liked, to be polite, to be agreeable. Approval became your invisible currency. Every smile you gave, every time you stayed silent when your truth was burning, every time you followed the crowd even though your soul screamed no, it was a transaction. You sold fragments of yourself for a sense of belonging. But the cost was high. You began to mold yourself into a version others could accept. Slowly, you became a stranger to your own voice. Your needs were secondary, your emotions edited. And now, as an adult, the habit persists. You wait for others to validate your choices. You hesitate before speaking your truth. You shrink yourself to avoid judgment. What you may not realize is that this search for approval has become a cage, a subtle, silent imprisonment of your potential. And the worst part, you locked the door yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. He warned that those who seek the approval of others surrender their power. In his words, he who cannot command himself will always be a servant. And make no mistake, approval is a form of servitude. It is placing your self-worth in someone else's hands. It is living in fear of being disliked, rejected, dismissed. You may think you are being kind, humble, socially intelligent, but when you sacrifice your truth for applause, you become a ghost. Your authenticity fades, your spirit withers, because you are no longer living for truth. You are performing for acceptance. Think about it. How many decisions in your life were made out of fear of what others would think? How many dreams were abandoned not because they were impossible, but because they were unconventional? How much of your identity is actually yours? And how much is borrowed from what society told you is acceptable? Nietzsche's philosophy was not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was about freedom. The kind of freedom that begins when you stop caring whether others understand you, when you speak your mind without rehearsing, when you choose yourself even if no one claps. He called this the path of the Übermensch, the higher self. Not someone who dominates others, but someone who masters their own instincts. Someone who dares to stand alone if it means standing in truth. But here's the reality. That path is lonely at first. When you stop seeking approval, the silence is deafening. The attention fades. The people who only loved your mask disappear. And that is where most people turn back. They would rather be liked than be free. But Nietzsche believed that only through this fire of solitude can true individuality emerge. Only when you let go of the need to be liked can you finally see who you are. This is not about becoming arrogant or indifferent. It is about liberation. It is about no longer editing your soul to fit someone else's frame. It is the quiet rebellion that begins not with noise, but with a decision to stop waiting for permission to exist. You do not need everyone to like you. You do not need to be understood to be valuable. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to be real. And realness, raw, unapologetic realness, is rarely applauded. So the next time you hesitate before speaking, the next time you consider hiding your truth for the sake of being accepted, remember this: every act of approval seeking is a small betrayal, a quiet self-erasure. Let this be the beginning of your refusal. You will lose people. You will lose comfort, but in that loss, you will find something extraordinary, yourself. At some point, you stopped being yourself, not by choice, but by survival. You learned which parts of you were rewarded and which were punished. You learned when to speak and when to stay silent. You learned that certain emotions, anger, sadness, frustration, made people uncomfortable, so you buried them. You created a version of yourself that was easier to love. This is the beginning of the mask. It's subtle at first, a few small compromises, a little smile here, a swallowed truth there, but over time it becomes a full performance, a character you wear so well, even you start to believe it is real. And that mask, it gets applause, it gets likes, it fits into rooms, it keeps things peaceful, but it also kills your spirit. Nietzsche hated masks, not because they were dishonest, but because they were cowardly. He believed that to live authentically was to live dangerously, that the self was not something to be tamed, but something to be unleashed. And masks, no matter how beautiful, are chains. Chains that bind you to a version of yourself that is digestible for others. He wrote, "Every deep thinker is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood." Why? Because understanding requires exposure. It requires taking off the mask. It means standing naked before the world and saying, "This is me." And most people are terrified of that kind of visibility. When you hide behind a mask long enough, you forget what your real face looks like. You begin to mistake approval for love, obedience for wisdom, acceptance for alignment. But Nietzsche knew, and now you must know, that none of these are truth. Truth does not require applause. Truth often walks alone, and the greatest tragedy is not being rejected for who you are. It is being accepted for who you're not. You must ask yourself, who are you performing for? What do you gain from their approval that is worth the price of your integrity? Because behind the mask, your real self is suffocating. It waits, it whispers, it resents you, and one day it may erupt in anger, depression, anxiety, not because it hates the world, but because it hates the lie it's forced to live. Here is the truth. If you want to be truly free, you must risk being disliked. You must be willing to disappoint others in order to stay loyal to yourself. You must accept that the world may not understand your transformation, and that's okay. You're not here to be understood. You're here to become. And becoming is messy, it's loud, it disrupts the status quo. It makes people uncomfortable. But that discomfort is the price of authenticity. Nietzsche's call was simple but terrifying. Stop pretending. Stop smiling when you want to scream. Stop nodding when your soul says no. Rip the mask off, even if it leaves you alone in the room. Because the mask may win you love, but it will never earn you peace. And peace is the only thing worth chasing. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why being liked feels so good? That rush of validation when someone praises you, the comfort of fitting in, the quiet relief when no one criticizes you. These small gimmicks, they feel harmless, even healthy. But look closer, feel deeper. What are you really feeding? It's not joy, it's a hunger. An ache that was planted early. Maybe it started with a parent who only smiled when you succeeded. Maybe it was a teacher who only acknowledged you when you were quiet, or a world that rewarded you every time you disappeared a little more. You began to associate safety with approval, and so you kept chasing it. Smiles, compliments, likes. You learned to bend yourself to fit every situation. You became adaptable, polite, easy to love. But with every compromise, something in you faded. You didn't become more accepted. You became less you. This is not just emotional behavior, this is chemical, psychological, and most dangerously, spiritual. You're not chasing approval. You're chasing permission to exist. Nietzsche saw this need for approval as one of the greatest sicknesses of modern man. He called it the herd instinct, the compulsion to belong, to agree, to follow. And he hated it, not because belonging was bad, but because it demanded that you abandon your inner truth in exchange for external comfort. He warned, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. To Nietzsche, the crowd is not wise. It is terrified. Terrified of change. Terrified of anyone who refuses to conform. And so, to maintain comfort, the herd praises obedience and punishes individuality. It calls you arrogant when you speak your mind, selfish when you follow your calling, difficult when you stop nodding and start questioning. But Nietzsche believed that true freedom begins when you walk away from the herd, when you stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I think? Approval is not love, it is control. And the more you crave it, the easier you are to manipulate. A person addicted to approval will betray their own soul for a moment of acceptance. You've been conditioned to believe that rejection is dangerous. But the real danger is living a life so approved by others that you forget who you are. You were not born to please. You were born to awaken. And awakening does not require permission. It begins the moment you look around at all the roles you've been playing and say, enough. The moment you realize that every nod, every smile, every quiet agreement has been a leash, and you're tired of being tame. To stop seeking approval is not to become cruel. It is to become clear. You are not for everyone. You never were. The ones who love the real you will stay. The ones who only loved the mask were never yours to keep. Nietzsche believed in the Übermensch, the higher man, who stands alone, not because he wants to, but because he must. Because his soul demands a truth too loud for the crowd, a life too wild for the cage. So here is your task. Every time you feel that craving for approval rise in your chest, pause. Don't reach, don't perform, don't shrink. Stand still, breathe, and remember, you were not made to be liked. You were made to be real. You already know the feeling. You smile when you want to scream. You say yes when everything in you says no. You nod along when the conversation goes against your beliefs. You feel it in your chest. That moment when you betray yourself to protect someone else's comfort. And the world praises you for it. They say you're mature, you're easygoing, you're nice. But inside something wilts, something tightens, because deep down you know. You're not being kind, you're being compliant. You're not choosing peace, you're choosing invisibility. And it's not costing you their respect, it's costing you yourself. Nietzsche had little patience for the so-called good person who lived to please others. In fact, he believed that the obsession with being liked was the most dangerous form of self-betrayal. He wrote, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." In other words, you are taught to admire similarity over truth, agreement over individuality, applause over authenticity. And so you become careful, predictable, agreeable. But Nietzsche warned, this creates a society of masks, a world full of hollow people, everyone smiling, everyone pretending, everyone hiding the fire inside just to avoid being seen as difficult. He believed that real integrity demands resistance, not violence. Not rebellion for its own sake, but the courage to not bend when your soul says no. Because every time you say yes to be liked, you say no to your own becoming. The need to be liked makes you small. It turns your voice into an echo, your choices into votes, your life into a performance. And the applause you receive? It's not for you, it's for the version of you they approve of. The tamed, filtered, watered-down version. You think you're gaining love, but you're just earning permission to exist under their conditions. And that is not love. That is quiet control. At some point, you must look in the mirror and ask, what have I lost just to be liked? How many dreams did you silence because they seemed too bold? How many opinions did you bury because they weren't safe? How many times have you abandoned yourself in the name of being accepted? And what did you gain? Being liked is not worth being hollow. Nietzsche's philosophy wasn't a call to selfishness. It was a call to wholeness, to live in alignment with your deepest convictions, even if it means being misunderstood, even if it means walking alone. He urged you to be a fire, not a candle, to stop dimming yourself for those afraid of your light. So, if you want to reclaim your soul, start here. Stop asking how to be liked. Start asking how to be true. When you stop performing for the crowd, your real life begins. And yes, some people will leave. Let them. They were only clapping for the mask anyway. At some point in your journey, something shifts. You stop needing everyone to get it. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop explaining your decisions to people who never cared to listen in the first place. You stop apologizing for who you are. And for the first time, silence feels like power. Disagreement feels like clarity. Solitude feels like home. You realize maybe it was never about being liked. Maybe it was about being free. Nietzsche called it the loneliness of the long-distance thinker. The one who walks where the crowd never goes. The one who dares to ask, what if everything they taught me was wrong? He believed that to become who you truly are, you must go through the fire of misunderstanding. Not everyone will come with you. In fact, most won't. Because most people are not looking for truth. They are looking for validation. And when you stop playing that game, when you no longer need to be liked, praised, approved of, you become dangerous. Not in the way of violence, but in the way of authenticity, of clarity, of refusal. You stop being polite when it costs your peace. You stop following rules that were never made for you. You stop seeking comfort in empty praise. And you start creating a life that feels real, even if no one else understands it. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming your own standard. Not a rebel for attention, not a contrarian for ego, but someone who has burned through the illusion and found something unshakable within themselves. Because once you've been misunderstood and survived, you realize approval was never the prize. Truth was. And the truth is, you don't need them to see you. You need to see yourself. You are not here to be liked. You are here to become, to rise from the ashes of people-pleasing, to shed the need for constant reassurance, to stop explaining your worth, to stop translating your soul into language others will accept. You are not here to make everyone comfortable. You are not here to shrink to fit the mold. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to be undeniably you. And that means sometimes they will leave. Let them. Sometimes they will laugh. Let them. Sometimes they will call you selfish, arrogant, difficult. Let them, because every insult they throw is just a sign you've stopped performing. You've stopped begging. You've stopped seeking the crumbs of approval from a table that was never yours. Nietzsche believed the highest form of freedom was this: to live without permission. So let this be your liberation. You owe no one your smallness. You owe no one your silence. You owe no one your obedience. You only owe yourself your truth. Walk your path. Even if they don't clap. Even if they don't follow. Even if they don't understand. Because the one who no longer needs to be understood is the one who is finally, unshakably free.